Chapter 9. Jerry's Party. Both Penny and Jerry regretted the incident, feeling that they had been at fault because they had driven into the play area at such high speed. "Maybe I can send the kid a box of candy or make it up to her in some way," the reporter remarked. Roving about the yard, he and Penny talked to many of the orphans. Nearly all of the children answered questions self-consciously and had little to say. "We'll not get much of a story here," Jerry commented in an undertone. "These youngsters are about as alike as if they'd been cut from one pattern." "Adele was different," Penny returned with a smile. "Almost too much so." In a short while, Miss Anderson, the young woman who had taken the child away, returned to the play yard. Penny and Jerry immediately inquired after the little girl. "Oh, she's quite herself again," the young woman responded. "The upset was only a temporary one." "Is Adele easily frightened?" Penny inquired curiously. "Unfortunately, she is terrified of automobiles," responded Miss Anderson. "I'm afraid it's becoming a complex. You see, about a year ago, both of her parents were killed in a motor accident." "How dreadful!" Penny gasped. "Adele was in the car but escaped with a broken leg," the young woman resumed. "The incident made a very deep impression upon her." "I should think so!" exclaimed Jerry. "How did the accident occur?" "We don't know exactly, for Adele was the only witness. According to her story, the Hanover automobile was crowded off the road by another motorist who drove at reckless speed without lights. The car upset, pinning the occupants beneath it." "It seems to me I remember that story," Jerry said thoughtfully. "The hit-run driver never was caught." "No, according to Adele, he stopped only to drive on again when he saw that her parents were beyond help." "The man must have been heartless!" Penny declared indignantly. "How could he run away?" "Because he feared the consequences," Miss Anderson answered. "Had he been apprehended, he would have faced charges for manslaughter and undoubtedly would have been assessed heavy damages." "I take it the child has no property or she wouldn't be at this institution," Jerry said soberly. "Adele is penniless. Her parents were her only relatives, so she was brought to us." "It's a shame!" Penny declared feelingly. "Wasn't there any clue as to the identity of the man who caused the fatal accident?" "No worthwhile ones. Adele insists she saw the driver's face plainly and could recognize him again. However, she was never able to give a very good description, nor to make an identification." Having heard the story, Jerry was more than ever annoyed at himself because he had caused the child needless suffering. "Miss Anderson, isn't there something I can do to make amends?" he asked earnestly. "What would the little girl like? Candy? Toys?" "It isn't necessary that you give her anything." "I want to do it," Jerry insisted. "In that case, why not make some small bequest to the institution, or send something which might be enjoyed by all the children?" "Jerry, I have an idea," Penny said impulsively. "Why not give a party? Would that be permissible, Miss Anderson?" "Yes, indeed. The children love them, and outings away from the institution are their special delight." "Let's give a watermelon party," Penny proposed, immediately considering herself Jerry's partner in the affair. "We could take the children to a nearby farm and let them gorge themselves." "The children would enjoy it, I'm sure," Miss Anderson smiled. "Can transportation be arranged? We do have 60 boys and girls." "I'll take care of everything," Jerry promised. "Suppose we set tomorrow afternoon as the date." "Oh, couldn't we have the party at night?" Penny pleaded. "There'll be a full moon. A watermelon feast wouldn't be much fun by daylight." Miss Anderson replied that she thought the children might be allowed to attend such a party, providing it were held early in the evening. Penny and Jerry talked with her about various details of the plan, and then drove away from the institution. "Well, you certainly got me into something," Jerry chuckled as the car turned onto the main road. "Where are we going to throw this party?" "Oh, any melon farmer will be glad to let the children invade his patch, providing we pay for the privilege," Penny answered carelessly. "You might turn in at the next farm." Her confidence proved to be ill-founded, for Mr. Caller, the farmer whom they accosted, would not consider the proposition. Children will trample the vines and do a lot of damage," he declined. "Why don't you try the Wentover place?" At the Wentover farm, Jerry and Penny likewise were turned down. "No one wants 60 orphans running rampant all over his place," the reporter observed in discouragement. "We may as well give up the idea." "It's possible Mrs. Davis would allow us to hold a muskmelon party at her farm," Penny replied thoughtfully. "Now that her husband has skipped, she must be in need of money." The chance of success seemed unlikely. However, to please Penny, Jerry drove to the Davis property. To their surprise, they found the place humming with activity. Professional melon pickers were at work in the patch, and Mrs. Davis, dressed in overalls, was personally supervising the laborers. "I have no time to answer questions," she announced to Jerry before he could speak. "Please go away and leave me alone." "Oh, I'm not here in an official capacity this time," the reporter grinned. "We want to make you a business proposition." He then explained what he had in mind. Mrs. Davis listened attentively, but with suspicion. "It's likely some trick," she declared. "I'll have nothing to do with it." "Mrs. Davis, we're not trying to deceive you," Penny interposed. "We've tried several other farms before we came here. No one is willing to let the children trample the vines." "Oh, I suppose it wouldn't hurt mine," the woman admitted. "By tomorrow night we'll have all the best melons picked and sorted. I reckon the youngsters can have what's left in the patch." "We'll pay you well for the privilege," Jerry promised, taking out his wallet. "I don't want your money," the woman answered shortly. "Just see to it that the youngsters don't tear the place up." Neither Penny nor Jerry wished to accept such a favor, but Mrs. Davis firmly refused to take pay. "You know, I think the old girl has a tender heart beneath a hard exterior," the reporter remarked after the woman had gone back to the patch. "Down under, she's a pretty decent sort." For a time, Penny and Jerry watched the laborers at their work. Heaping baskets of melons were brought from the patch to the barn. There they were sorted, stamped, and packed into crates which were loaded onto a truck. "Nice looking melons," the reporter remarked. "Mrs. Davis should make a pretty fair profit." An elderly workman who was sorting melons glanced sideways at Jerry, grinning in a knowing way. "Maybe," he said. "What do you mean by that?" Jerry questioned him. "Selling melons is a speculative business," the old fellow shrugged. "You ain't sure anything till your harvest is sold and you get the money in your fist." Penny and Jerry watched the sorting work for a few minutes longer and then returned to the car. "You know, for a minute I thought that old duffer was hinting at something," the reporter remarked. "He acted as if it would give him real pleasure to see something happen to Mrs. Davis' melons." "Oh, I didn't take it that way," Penny responded. "He was only waxing philosophical." The hour was late. Knowing that he might be wanted at the Star office, Jerry drove rather fast over the bumpy road. As the press car sped around a bend, a man who stood leaning against a fence post quickly retreated into the woods. His act, however, had drawn Penny's attention. "Stop the car, Jerry!" she cried. "There he is again!" "Who?" demanded the reporter, slamming on brakes. "I think it's the same man who hid in the cornfield!" Penny exclaimed excitedly. "It must be Clem Davis!" End of chapter 9. Chapter 10. In the Melon Patch. "Which way did the fellow go?" Jerry demanded, bringing the car to a standstill. "Into the woods," Penny answered tersely. Leaping from the automobile, they climbed a fence and reached the edge of the woods. Pausing there, they listened intently. No sound could be heard, not even the crackling of a stick. "This timberland extends for miles," Jerry said. "We'd only waste time playing hide and seek in there. Our best bet is to notify Sheriff Daniels and let him throw a net around the entire section." "I guess you're right," Penny acknowledged regretfully. Making all haste to Riverview, they stopped briefly at the sheriff's office to make their report. Penny then said goodbye to Jerry and went to the newspaper building where she had parked Leaping Lena. The car would not start. Experienced in such matters, Penny raised the hood and posed beside it, a picture of a young lady in deep distress. Soon a taxicab cruised along. "Having trouble, sister?" the driver asked. Penny slammed down the hood and scrambled into Leaping Lena. "Oh, just give me a little push," she instructed briskly. Obligingly, the taxi driver backed into position behind leaping Lena. After the two cars had gathered speed, Penny shifted gears. Lena responded with an ailing cough and then a steady chug. "Thanks!" Penny shouted, waving farewell to her benefactor. "I'll return the favor someday." "Not with that piece of junk," the taxi man laughed. By keeping the motor running at high speed, Penny reached home without mishap. Her father had arrived ahead of her, she noted, for the maroon car had been put away for the night. Locking the garage doors, Penny entered the house by way of the kitchen. "Where's Dad?" she asked the housekeeper, absently helping herself to a freshly baked cookie. "Listen and I think you can tell," Mrs. Weems answered. A loud hammering noise came from the basement. Inspired by an advertisement of Walden's oak paneling, Mr. Parker had decided to wall up the recreation room without the services of a carpenter. Much of his spare time was spent carrying on a personal feud with boards which refused to fit into the right places. "Poor Dad!" Penny grinned as she heard a particularly loud exclamation of wrath. "I'll go down and drip a few consoling words." Descending the stairs, she stood watching her father from the doorway of the recreation room. "Hello, Penny," he said, looking over his shoulder. "You may as well make yourself useful. Hold this board while I nail it in place." "All right, but be careful where you pound. Remember, I only have two hands and I prize them both." With Penny holding the board, Mr. Parker nailed it to the underpinning. "Well, what do you think of the job?" he asked, standing back to admire his work. "As a carpenter, you're a very good editor," Penny answered with exaggerated politeness. "Aren't walls supposed to come together at the corners?" "I made a little mistake in my calculations. Later on I may build a corner cupboard to cover up the slight gap." "Slight?" Penny chuckled. "Dad, if I were you, I wouldn't get tangled up in any more carpenter jobs. It's too hard on your disposition." "I never was in a better mood in my life," Mr. Parker insisted. "Good reason, too. At last I've got the best of Mr. Ben Bowman." "Bowman?" Penny inquired in a puzzled tone. "That crank who keeps sending me collect messages." "Oh, to be sure. I'd forgotten about him." "He sent another telegram today," Mr. Parker declared, smiling grimly. "I suspected it came from him and refused to pay for it." "Bravo!" Penny approved. "I knew you would get the best of that fellow if you just put your mind to it." On the floor above, a telephone rang, but neither of them paid any heed, knowing that Mrs. Weems would answer. In a moment, the housekeeper called down the stairway, telling Mr. Parker he was wanted on the phone. "It's Mr. DeWitt from the office," she informed him. Putting aside his hammer, Mr. Parker went upstairs. Soon he returned to the basement, his manner noticeably subdued. "What's the matter, Dad?" Penny inquired curiously. "You look as if you'd just received a stunning blow." "DeWitt telephoned to tell me the Star lost an important story today." "How did that happen, Dad?" "Well, a correspondent wired in the news, but by accident the message never reached DeWitt's desk." Penny regarded her father shrewdly. "Ben Bowman's telegram." "I'm afraid it was," Mr. Parker admitted. "The message came to $2. I didn't know DeWitt had hired a correspondent at the town of Altona. Naturally, I jumped to conclusions." "So you lost a news story because you refused a bona fide telegram," Penny said, shaking her head. "Ben Bowman scores again." "You see what I'm up against," the editor growled. "I'd give $100 to be rid of that pest." "You really mean it?" Penny demanded with interest. "My peace of mind would be well worth the price." "In that case, I may apply my own brain to the task. I could use $100. The discussion was interrupted by Mrs. Weems, who called that dinner was ready. As Mr. Parker went to his usual place at the dining room table, he saw a yellow envelope lying on his plate. "What's this?" he demanded sharply. "A telegram," explained Mrs. Weems. "It came only a moment ago. I paid the boy." "How much was the message?" the editor asked, his face grim. $1.50. Mrs. Weems regarded her employer anxiously. "Did I do anything I shouldn't have? I supposed, of course, you would want me to accept the message." "This is just too good," Penny chuckled, thoroughly enjoying the situation. "Everything so perfectly timed, almost as if it were a play." "I don't understand," Mrs. Weems murmured. "I've done something I shouldn't?" "It wasn't your fault," Mr. Parker assured her. "In the future, however, refuse to accept any collect message." As her father did not open the telegram, Penny seized upon it. "This is from a man who calls himself Isaac Fullerton," she disclosed, glancing at the bottom of the typed page. "Merely one of Ben Bowman's many names," Mr. Parker sighed. "Ah, this is a gem," Penny chuckled and read aloud. "Here is a suggestion for your rotten rag. Why not print it on yellow paper? I know you will not use it because editors think they know everything. I once knew a reader who got a little good out of your paper. He used it to clean the garbage can." "How dreadful!" Mrs. Weems exclaimed, genuinely shocked. "Penny, if you insist upon reading another line, I shall leave the table," Mr. Parker snapped. "I've had quite enough of Ben Bowman." "I'm sorry, Dad," Penny apologized, slipping the message into her pocket. "I can appreciate that this doesn't seem very funny to you." The telegram was not mentioned again. Nevertheless, Mr. Parker's good humor had given way to moody silence, contributing no cheer to the evening meal. Mrs. Weems kept glancing uneasily at her employer, wondering if she had offended him. Only Penny, whose appetite never failed, seemed thoroughly at ease. "Dad," she said suddenly, "I have an idea how Ben Bowman might be trailed." "Never mind telling me," her father answered. "I prefer not to hear his name mentioned." "As you like," she shrugged. "I'll shroud myself in mystery and silence as I work. But when the case is ended, I will present my bill." Actually, Penny held slight hope that ever she would be able to turn the elusive Ben Bowman over to the police. The wily fellow was far too clever ever to file two messages from the same telegraph office, and very seldom from the same city. However, the town of Claymore, from which the last message had been sent, was only 55 miles away. It had occurred to her that by going there she might obtain from the telegraph officials the original message filed. "In that way, I'd at least have Ben Bowman's signature," she reflected. "While it wouldn't be much, it represents a start." Always, Penny's greatest problem was insufficient time. Greatly as she desired to drive to Claymore, she knew it would be out of the question for several days. Not only must arrangements for the orphans' melon party be completed, but other interests demanded attention. Temporarily dismissing Ben Bowman from her mind, Penny devoted herself to plans for the outing. Cars easily were obtained, and the following night 60 excited orphans were transported to the Davis farm. With shrieks of laughter, the boys and girls took possession of the melon patch. "Pick all you like from the vines," Penny called, "but don't touch any of the crated ones." In the yard, not far from the storage barn, stood a truck loaded with melons which were ready for market. "This must represent the cream of Mrs. Preston's crop," Jerry remarked, lifting the canvas which covered the load. "Maybe she'll be luckier than her neighbors, the Doolittles." "What happened to them?" Penny asked, surprised by the remark. "Don't you read the Star?" "I didn't today. Too busy. Tell me about the Doolittles, Jerry." "Mr. Doolittle was taking a load of melons to market. Another truck brushed him on the river road. The melon truck upset and the entire shipment was lost." "Can't he get damages?" "Doolittle didn't learn who was responsible." "Was it an accident or done deliberately?" Penny asked thoughtfully. "Sheriff Daniels thinks it was an accident. I'm inclined to believe the Black Hoods may have had something to do with it." "Why should anyone wish to make trouble for Mr. Doolittle, Jerry? All his life he has stayed on his little truck farm and strictly attended to his own affairs." "There's only one possible reason so far as I know," the reporter answered. "Not long ago, Doolittle refused to join the Holloway County Cooperative, an organization that markets crops for the truck farmers." "And you believe the Hoods may be connected with the cooperative?" "I wouldn't go so far as to say that," Jerry replied hastily. Fact is, the Holloway Cooperative always has had a good reputation. "There's no question that the Preston barn was destroyed by the Hoods," Penny said thoughtfully. "Although the evidence pointed to Clem Davis, I've never felt satisfied he was guilty." "Same here," agreed Jerry. "Another thing I keep mulling over is what the melon sorter said yesterday." "You mean his hint that something might happen to Mrs. Davis' crop?" "Yeah, maybe he knew more than he let on." "The Hoods will have to work fast to destroy the Davis melons," Penny rejoined. "Besides, didn't the sheriff uncover proof that Clem Davis is a member of the organization?" "That's what he says. I wonder about that, too." Not far from the truck was a small pile of discarded melons, culls which were misshapen or overripe. Selecting one, Jerry tossed it into the air and caught it. "Just the right size for a hand grenade," he remarked. "Watch." He threw the melon hard against the barn. It burst against the siding, breaking into a dozen fragments and leaving an unsightly blotch of oozing seeds. "Jerry, you shouldn't do that," Penny chided. "Mrs. Davis won't like it." "Okay, I'll be good," the reporter promised. The temptation was just too strong to resist. By this time, the hubbub in the melon patch had slightly subsided as the youngsters gained their fill of cantaloupe. Soon, institution officials began to pilot the children to the waiting cars. Several lads protested at the termination of the party. "Oh, do let those boys stay a while longer," Penny pleaded. "Jerry and I will bring them back in a few minutes." "Very well," the matron consented. "But don't allow them to eat so many melons that they will be sick." The responsibility of looking after 6 orphans weighed heavily upon Penny. After the cars had driven away, she and Jerry patrolled the patch, trying vainly to maintain order. With institution authorities no longer present, the boys proceeded to enjoy themselves. They ran races down the furrows, lassoed one another with vines, and pelted ripe melons against the fence posts. "Hey, you little hoodlums!" Jerry shouted. "Cut it out, or you'll go back to the home pronto." "Says who?" mocked one saucy little fellow in a piping voice. "Quiet, everybody!" commanded Penny. "Listen!" In the silent night could be heard the clatter of horses' hooves. Jerry whirled around, gazing toward the entrance to the lane. 2 horsemen, black hoods covering their faces, rode at a hard gallop toward the storage barn. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. Penny's Clue. "The nightshirt riders!" Jerry exclaimed. "Duck down, everyone." Penny and the 6 lads from the Riverview home crouched low, watching the approach of the 2 riders. "One of those men may be Clem Davis, but I doubt it," muttered Jerry. "They're here to destroy the crated cantaloupes." "Jerry, we can't let them get away with it!" Penny exclaimed. "Why not pelt them with melons when they get closer?" "Okay," he agreed grimly. "We'll give them a spoiled cantaloupe blitz. Gather your ammunition, gang, and get ready." Screened from the approaching horsemen by trees and bushes, the young people hastily collected a few overripe cantaloupes which were small enough to throw with accuracy. Unaware of the barrage awaiting them, the 2 hooded men rode into the yard. "Now!" Jerry gave the signal. "Let 'em have it!" Taking careful aim, he hurled his own melon with all his strength. It found its mark, striking one of the men with stunning force, nearly causing him to fall from the saddle. Penny and the boys from the orphans' home concentrated their efforts on the other horsemen. While many of their shots were wild, a few went true. One struck the horse, which reared suddenly on her hind legs, unseating the rider. "Give it to him!" Jerry shouted, observing that the fallen man was unhurt. Handicapped by lack of ammunition, there followed a brief lull in the battle as the young people sought to replenish their stock. Seizing the opportunity, one of the night riders galloped away. The other man, who had lost his horse, scrambled into the cab of the loaded melon truck. "He's going to drive off!" Penny cried. "Let's stop him!" She and Jerry ran toward the truck, but they were too late. The giant motor started with a roar, and the heavy vehicle rolled out of the yard. Just then, Mrs. Davis came running from the cabin. "My melons!" she screamed. They've taken my melons! Oh, I was afraid something like this would happen." "Maybe I can overtake that fella," Jerry called to her. "Ride herd on these kids until I get back." As he ran toward his own car, Penny was close at his heels. She slid into the seat beside him and they raced down the lane. "Which way did that truck go?" Jerry demanded. "I was so excited I forgot to notice." "It turned right. No sign of it now, though." "The fella is running without lights to try to make it harder for us to follow him." Jerry and Penny both were hopeful that they could overtake the truck, which carried a heavy load. However, they had been delayed several minutes in getting started, and as the miles fell behind them, they caught no glimpse of the man they pursued. "He must have turned off on that little side road we passed about a quarter of a mile back," Penny declared in discouragement. "Switch off the engine a minute." Bringing the car to a standstill, Jerry did as instructed. Both listened intently. From far over the hills, they thought they could hear the muffled roar of a powerful motor. "You're right, Penny. He turned off at that side road," Jerry exclaimed, backing the coupe around. "We'll get him yet." Retracing their route, they started down the narrow, rutty highway. 5 minutes later, rounding a sharp bend, they caught their first glimpse of the truck, a dark object silhouetted in the moonlight. Only for a moment did it remain visible, and then, descending a hill, was lost to view. "We're gaining fast," Jerry said in satisfaction. "It won't be long now." The coupe rattled over a bridge. For no reason at all, it began to bump, a loud pounding noise coming from the rear of the car. "Gracious, what now?" Penny exclaimed. "A flat," Jerry answered tersely. "Just our luck." Pulling up at the side of the road, he jumped out to peer at the tires. As he had feared, the left rear one was down. "We'll probably lose that fella now," he said irritably. With Penny holding a flashlight, the reporter worked as fast as he could to change the tire. However, nearly 15 minutes elapsed before the task had been accomplished. "We may as well turn back," he said, tossing tools into the back of the car. "How about it?" "Oh, let's keep on a little further," Penny pleaded. "If we drive fast, we might still overtake him." Without much hope, they resumed the pursuit. Tires whined a protest as they swung around sharp corners, and the motor began to heat. "This old bus can't take it anymore," Jerry declared, slackening speed again. "No sense in ruining the car." Penny had been watching the road carefully. They had passed no bisecting highways, so she felt certain that the truck could not have turned off. On either side of the unpaved thoroughfare were lonely stretches of swamp and woods. "Let's not turn back yet," she pleaded. "We still have a chance." "Okay," Jerry consented. "But don't forget we have 6 orphans waiting for us at the Davis place." The car went on for another 8 miles. Then came a welcome stretch of pavement. "We must be getting near the state line," Jerry remarked. "Yeah, there it is." Directly ahead was a tiny brick building with an official waiting to inspect cars which passed beyond that point. A series of markers warned the motorist to stop at the designated place. As Jerry drove up, a man came from behind the little building. "Carrying any shrubs, plants or fruit?" he began, but the reporter cut him short. "We're following a stolen truck," he exclaimed. "Has a red truck loaded with cantaloupes gone through here tonight?" "I checked one about 15 minutes ago." 15 minutes, Jerry groaned. "Well, that finishes us." "The trucker could have reached Claymore by this time," the inspector responded. "Once in the city, you wouldn't have much chance to pick him up. I have the truck license number though. If you'll give me all the facts, I'll make a report to the Claymore police." There was no point in pursuing the thief farther. Accordingly, Penny and Jerry provided the requested information and then drove to the Davis farm. Regretfully, they told Mrs. Davis of their failure to trace the melon thief. "I've lost my crop, the truck, everything," she said in a crushed voice. "What's the use of trying anyhow? A body would be smarter to go along with him than to try to fight." "I take it you have a pretty fair idea who it was that came here tonight," Jerry said shrewdly. "Who are these Hoods?" "I don't dare tell you," the woman answered fearfully. "You saw what they did tonight." They threw the blame for the Preston fire on Clem. They'll do worse things if I don't keep mum." "You want to help your husband, don't you?" Penny inquired. "Of course I do, but I know better than to talk." "You've been warned." Jerry pursued the subject. "Yes, I have. Now don't ask me any more questions. I've told you too much already." "I just want to know one thing," Jerry said relentlessly. "Did your trouble start because you and your husband refused to join the Holloway Cooperative?" "Maybe it did," the woman answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I ain't saying." It was apparent to Jerry and Penny that they could expect no assistance from Mrs. Davis. Although the events of the night had convinced them that Clem Davis was innocent, others would not share their opinion. They felt that by shielding the guilty parties, Mrs. Davis was adopting a very stupid attitude. "Come on, Penny," Jerry said with a shrug. "Let's be moving." 6 reluctant orphans were rounded up from the hayloft, where a boisterous game of hide and seek was in progress. "I can jam 4 into my coupe if you can handle the other 2 in your car," Jerry remarked to Penny. "If they make you any trouble, just toot the horn twice and I'll come back and settle with them." "Oh, we'll get along fine," she smiled. "Come along, boys." "Here's a souvenir to remember the night by," Jerry said. From the ground he picked up 2 melons which he handed to the orphans. "Just don't sock the matron with them when you get back to the home." "Jerry, let me see one of those melons!" Penny exclaimed suddenly. "They fell from the truck, didn't they?" "I guess so," Jerry responded, surprised by her display of interest. "What about 'em?" "I'll show you." Turning on the dash light of the car, Penny held the melon in its warm glow. Slowly she turned it in her hands. "There," she said, pointing to a tiny triangle-shaped marking on the cantaloupe. "This may prove a clue which will lead to the capture of the thief." "I don't get it," answered Jerry. "What clue?" "Why, this stamping on the melon," she replied excitedly. "The Hoods must intend to sell that load of cantaloupes. If they do, we may be able to trace the shipment." End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. Adele's Disappearance. Jerry took the melon from Penny's hand to examine it. "This stamp may be helpful," he said dubiously, "but I doubt it. The Hoods never would be so stupid as to sell melons which could be traced. No, I think our investigation will have to center close at home." "You're referring to the Holloway Cooperative, Jerry?" "That outfit certainly merits an investigation. In the morning I'll jog out to their packing plant and talk to the manager, Hank Holloway." "What time will you be going, Jerry?" "About 9 o'clock, probably." "Perhaps I'll meet you there," Penny said thoughtfully. "That is, if you don't mind." "Glad to have you," the reporter responded in a hearty voice. The 2 cars soon started for Riverview Orphans' Home, arriving there without mishap. After unloading the boys entrusted to their care, Jerry and Penny then went to their respective residences. "I'm glad you came at last," Mrs. Weems remarked as the girl entered the house. "You're to telephone Miss Anderson at the Riverview Orphans' Home." "But I just left there," Penny protested. "When did the call come?" "About 15 minutes ago." Wondering what could be amiss, Penny went to the telephone. In a moment she was in communication with Miss Anderson, who assisted the matron of the institution. The young woman's voice betrayed agitation as she disclosed that following the night's outing, an orphan had been discovered missing. "Oh, goodness!" Penny exclaimed aghast. "One of the 6 boys?" Miss Anderson's reply slightly reassured her. "No, the missing child is a little girl who was not permitted to attend the party because of a severe cold. You may remember her, Adele?" "Indeed I do, Miss Anderson. Tell me how I may help." "We've already organized searching parties," the young woman returned. "Adele will surely be found within a few hours. However, if the story gets out, it will do the institution no good, particularly at this time when our drive for funds is on." "I see," Penny murmured. "You would like the news kept out of the Star?" "Can it be arranged?" Miss Anderson asked eagerly. "If you will talk to your father about it, we'd be very grateful." "I'll ask him not to print the story," Penny promised, none too pleased by the request. I do hope Adele is found soon." She could not help feeling that the institution officials seemed far more worried about the prospect of unfavorable publicity than over the missing child's welfare. Saying goodbye to Miss Anderson, she sought her father, who was reading in the library. "Penny, you know I don't like to grant such favors," Mr. Parker frowned when the conversation was repeated to him. "As a matter of principle, it never pays to withhold information unless the telling will harm innocent persons." "In this case, it will damage the institution," Penny argued quietly. "Besides, I feel more or less responsible. What started out as a nice little party for the orphans ended in a regular brawl. It was planned primarily for Adele, and then she ran away because she wasn't permitted to attend." Starting at the very beginning, Penny told her father everything that had happened during the night. The tale was one of absorbing interest to Mr. Parker. When she had finished, he said: "Now, don't worry about the affair, Penny. I'm as interested in the Riverview Camp Fund as you are. We'll give the institution no unfavorable publicity." "Oh, thanks, Dad!" she cried gratefully, wrapping her arms about his neck. "You're just grand!" "Weak as water, you mean," he corrected with a chuckle. "By the way, I suppose you know that your friend Blake has been named to the Camp Fund board?" "No!" Penny exclaimed. "How did that happen?" "He hinted to Mrs. Van Cleve that he would like to serve. Naturally, after his handsome donation, she couldn't refuse." "Why do you suppose Mr. Blake has taken such a sudden interest in the home?" "I wonder myself. I've thought from the first that he's up to something. So far, I've not been able to figure out what his little game is." "Well, you're on the board too," Penny declared, undisturbed. "If he starts any monkey business, you can put a stop to it." "I fear you overestimate my talents," Mr. Parker responded. "However, I do intend to see that Blake doesn't profit too much by his donation." The hour was late and Penny soon went to bed. Disturbed by Adele's disappearance, she did not sleep well. Arising early, she telephoned the orphans' home, hoping to learn that the child had been found. No such good news awaited her. "Searchers have looked everywhere between here and the Davis farm," Miss Anderson revealed. "Unless the child is found by noon, it will be necessary to broadcast a general alarm, and that's certain to bring unfavorable attention to the home." "Is there any chance she could have been kidnapped?" Penny asked thoughtfully. "Not the slightest," was the prompt reply. "Adele took most of her clothes with her. It was a plain case of a runaway, but most annoying at this time." Penny ate a hasty breakfast and then, remembering her appointment with Jerry, drove to the Holloway Cooperative. The buildings were of modern concrete construction, located 3.5 miles from Riverview in the heart of the truck farming district. Jerry Livingston had not yet arrived, so Penny awaited in the car. Soon his coupe swung into the drive and pulled up alongside Leaping Lena. "Sorry to be late," he apologized. "I was held up at the office." Knowing that her father would have told Jerry about Adele's disappearance, Penny inquired regarding the latest news. "So far, there's not a trace of the child," the reporter answered. "Your father's sore at himself for promising not to carry the story. It may develop into something big." Penny walked beside Jerry to the entrance of the cooperative plant. "No one seems to worry much about Adele," she remarked. "The institution people are afraid of unfavorable publicity. Dad's alarmed about his story, while you and I are just plain indifferent." "I'm not indifferent," Jerry denied. "In a way, I feel responsible for that kid, but what can we do?" "Nothing, I guess," acknowledged Penny unwillingly. "Miss Anderson said they already had enough searchers." Opening the door of the building, they stepped into a huge room which hummed with activity. Girls in uniform stood at long tables inspecting melons, which moved on an endless belt arrangement before them. Sorted as to quality and size, each cantaloupe was stamped and packed in a crate which was then borne away. "Hank Holloway around here?" Jerry asked one of the workers. "Over there," the girl responded, pointing to a burly, red-faced man who stood at the opposite end of the room. Jerry and Penny approached the manager of the cooperative. "Good morning," the man said gruffly, gazing at them critically. "What can I do for you?" "We're from the Star," Jerry informed. "Do you mind answering a few questions?"
I'm pretty busy, Hank Holloway responded, frowning. What do you want to know?
There's a rumor going the rounds that this cooperative has been forcing farmers to market their melons through your organization.
That's a lie, the manager retorted. Why, they come here begging us to take their stuff. We get better prices than anyone in this section of the state, and we pass the profit right back to the farmers.
How do you account for the depredation that's been going on around here then lately? Who would you say is behind it?
What do you mean, depredation?
Hank Holloway demanded. The destruction of the Preston barn just as their melons were ready for market. Then last night, a truck of cantaloupes was stolen from the Davis place.
That's so? The manager asked. Hadn't heard about it. Clem Davis always was a worthless no good. It wouldn't surprise me that he covered his harvest with plenty of insurance and then arranged the snatch so he could collect.
That hardly seems reasonable, Jerry said dryly.
You asked for my opinion and I'm giving it to you. The Davis melons were so inferior, we wouldn't handle them at the cooperative.
Why, I thought their cantaloupes were particularly fine ones, Penny protested.
I don't know what you two are trying to get at,
Hank Holloway said with sudden anger.
The cooperative does business in a fair and square way. Our books are open for inspection at any time. Now you'll have to excuse me, for I got work to do.
With a curt nod, he turned away. Penny and Jerry wandered about the room for a few minutes, watching the packers. They did not much blame Hank Holloway for showing irritation. Their questions had been very pointed, and the man had immediately guessed that their purpose was to uncover facts detrimental to the cooperative. We learned about as much as I expected to, Jerry said with a shrug, as he and Penny finally left the building. Naturally, one couldn't hope he'd break down and confess all. What do you really think of him, Jerry? Hard to say, the reporter answered. He's a rough and ready sort, but that's not against him. There's no real reason to believe he's crooked, just a hunch of mine. Having been assigned to cover a board meeting, Jerry hurriedly said goodbye to Penny. Left to herself, she drove slowly towards Riverview. Since I'm so near Seth McGuire's place, I may as well stop for a minute or two, she thought impulsively. Despite many exciting events, Penny had not lost interest in the Hubble clock. Although it seemed reasonable that a faulty mechanism had caused it to strike 13, such an explanation did not completely satisfy her. She was eager to learn from the former caretaker if the difficulty had been corrected. Leaving her car by the main road, Penny went directly to the shop. The door was locked and closed. However, as she turned away, she distinctly heard a voice inside the building. Although she could not make out the words, she was certain that a child had called. "Who is it?" she shouted. "Help! Let me out!" came the plaintive cry from inside the shop. Penny ran to the window and peered into the dark interior. She scarcely was able to believe what she saw. A little girl, her face streaked with tears and dirt, pounded fiercely on the heavy door, seeking release. "It's Adele!" she gasped. "How in the world did she get locked in Mr. McGuire's shop?" End of chapter 12. Chapter 13. An extra stroke. With all of the windows and the door of the shop locked, Penny did not see how to free the imprisoned child. However, as she considered the problem, Seth McGuire appeared on the porch of the cottage. "Good morning," he greeted her pleasantly. "Oh, Mr. McGuire!" Penny exclaimed. "Did you know there is a child locked inside your shop?" "A child!" the old man exclaimed, coming quickly down the steps. "Why, bless me! How can that be?" "I don't understand how she got inside, but she's there. Officials of the Riverview Orphans' Home have been searching for Adele Hanover since last night." "Wait until I get my key," the old man said in an agitated voice. "I hope you don't think I locked the child into the shop." Knowing Mr. McGuire as she did, Penny entertained no such thought. Waving encouragingly to Adele through the window, she waited for the old man to return. "I locked the door about 11 o'clock last night," he explained, fumbling nervously with the key. "The little girl must have stolen in there sometime between 6 o'clock and that hour." The old man's hand shook so that he could not unlock the door. Taking the key, Penny did it for him. Adele, her hair flying wildly about her face, stumbled out of the shop. "I'm hungry," she sobbed. "It was cold in there and a big rat kept running around. Why did you lock me inside?" "Why, bless you," Mr. McGuire murmured. "I never dreamed there was anybody inside the shop. How did you get in there?" I went in last night and hid," Adele explained in a calmer voice. "It was cold outside and I had to have some place to sleep." "You should never have run away from the home," Penny reproved. "Why did you do it?" "Because I don't like it there," the child answered defiantly. "I'll never be adopted like the other children." "Why, how silly!" Penny answered. "Of course someone will adopt you." Adele shook her head. "Miss Anderson says I won't be. I heard her tell the matron. It's on account of a nervous affliction. I'm afraid of things, especially cars." "That's very natural, everything considered," Penny replied, thinking of the story Miss Anderson had told her. "Now I'll take you to the home." Adele drew away and, as if seeking protection, crowded close beside Mr. McGuire. "I'm never going back, even if I freeze and starve," she announced. "I'll find me a cave and live on berries. It would be more fun than being an orphan." Penny gazed despairingly at the old bell maker. With a chuckle, he took the child by the hand and led her toward the cottage. "We'll have lunch and talk things over," he proposed. "How will that be?" "I'm awfully hungry," Adele admitted, smiling up at him. "But you won't give me any old boiled potatoes, will you? We have 'em every single day at the home." "No potatoes," he laughed. "We'll have the very nicest things I can find in the ice box, and maybe a stick of candy to top it off." While Mr. McGuire pottered about the kitchen preparing a warm meal, Penny washed Adele and combed her tangled hair. Afterwards, she telephoned officials of the home, telling them that the child had been found. "I'll bring her there within an hour," she promised. "Just as soon as she's had her lunch." Adele was ravenous. She was not a pretty child, but her face had an elfin quality when she smiled. Her brown eyes, roving about the spick and span little dinette, took in every detail. "This is almost as nice as it was at our home," she remarked. I mean my real home, when Daddy and Mommy were alive." "You'll have a nice place again when you're adopted," Penny assured her kindly. "I'd like to stay here," Adele said, looking thoughtfully at the old man. "Would your wife let me?" "Why, bless you, I haven't a wife," he answered in embarrassment. "I'm a bachelor." "Wouldn't you like a little girl?" Adele persisted. "I could do your dishes for you and sweep the floor. I'd be real good." "Well, now, I've often thought I would like a nice little girl," he replied, smiling. "Then you can have me!" Adele cried, jumping up from her chair. "You can tell the home I won't be back." "Not so fast, not so fast," Mr. McGuire said hastily. "I'd like a little girl, but I'm afraid I can't afford one. You see, I don't make much money anymore, and there are other reasons." "Oh, I won't eat much," Adele promised. "Please keep me, Mr. McGuire." The old man was so distressed that Penny tried to come to his rescue. However, despite repeated explanations, Adele refused to understand why she could not immediately become Mr. McGuire's little girl. "If I had my old job back, I'd be tempted, sorely tempted," the old man said to Penny. "I've always wanted someone that was near and dear to me." He drew a deep sigh. "As things are, I don't see how it could be worked out." "Won't you keep thinking about it?" Adele pleaded. "Anytime you want me, I'll come right away." "Yes, I'll think about it," Mr. McGuire promised soberly. "I really will." An hour later, Penny took a very depressed Adele back to the Riverview Orphans' Home. Leaving her there, she drove on into town, chancing to see her chum, Louise Sidell, on the street. Signaling her with a toot of the horn, Penny swung wide the door. "On your way home, Lou?" she inquired. Nah, just wandering around in a daze, trying to do a bit of shopping, Louise answered, sharing the seat. The stores here never have anything I want. Then why not go to Claymore? Penny proposed suddenly. I would if I could get there. I'll take you, Penny offered. I need to go to Claymore on special business and I'd like to have someone ride along. Well, I don't know, Louise replied dubiously. I doubt Leaping Lena would stand such a long trip. Oh, I'll take the other car. In that case, the answer is yes, Louise replied instantly. Penny drove directly home to exchange cars and to tell Mrs. Weems where she was going. Louise and I may not be back until very late, she warned. It's barely possible we'll attend the theater while we're at Claymore. There's a new play on and everyone says it's grand. If you drive after night, be very careful, the housekeeper responded uneasily. There are so many accidents these days. A brief stop was made at the Seidel residence, and then the girls took to the road. Deliberately, Penny selected the same route which she and Jerry had followed the previous night. "Is that why we're going to Claymore?" Louise inquired curiously as she heard the story of what had happened to the Davis truck. "You intend to trace those stolen melons?" "I haven't much hope of doing that," Penny answered. "I want to visit the telegraph office and get an original message which was sent to Dad. His life has been made miserable by a pest who keeps sending him telegrams, and I'm out to catch the rascal." "You jump around from one thing to another so fast I can't keep track of your enterprises," Louise sighed. "Oh, I concentrate on the ones which offer a prospect of ready cash," Penny rejoined with a laugh. "If I catch Mr. Ben Bowman, it means exactly $100 to me." Upon reaching Claymore, the girls spent 2 hours shopping at the large department stores. Penny then made a tour of the telegraph offices. After explaining why she wished it, she was allowed to inspect and keep the original copy which bore the sender's signature. "I'll turn this handwriting over to the police," she explained to Louise. "They may be able to trace Ben Bowman by means of it." "Providing the man ever comes to Riverview," Louise said skeptically. "Seems like a forlorn hope to me." Before leaving the office, Penny inquired of the clerk who had handled the message if a description of Ben Bowman could be provided. "I don't really remember him," the young woman answered. "In general, I would say he was well dressed, probably about 35 years of age." "Not much to go on," Penny said regretfully. "Thanks anyhow." "Where now?" Louise asked in a weary voice as they finally left the telegraph office. "Shall we buy tickets to the play?" "Not yet," said Penny. "I'd like to wander around the market district a bit." For the next hour they did exactly that, selecting a section of the city where farmers brought their produce to sell in open stalls. Penny went from one counter to another, inspecting cantaloupes, hoping to find one which bore the Davis stamp. "I'm getting tired of pawing vegetables," Louise presently complained. "When do we eat?" "All right, we may as well call it a day," Penny replied reluctantly. In the downtown section of the city, the girls found a small cafe which advertised a deluxe dinner for $1. Treating themselves to the best, they enjoyed a leisurely meal and then bought theater tickets. "Penny, do you realize what all this is costing us?" Louise began to worry belatedly. "Oh, I'll make it up," Penny joked. "Wait until I capture Ben Bowman. With my profit from him, we'll paint the town red." "You're nothing if not optimistic," Louise said pityingly. The play was an excellent one, and when the curtain fell at 11, neither girl begrudged the money paid for the tickets. "It's been a grand day," Louise sighed contentedly as they left the theater. "Let's go home now as quickly as we can." The drive to Riverview consumed nearly an hour. As the girls approached the Hubell Tower, they noted by the illuminated clock face that the hands pointed to 12 o'clock. "The witching hour of midnight," Louise remarked. "Do you still think that mechanical creature has supernatural powers?" "Quiet!" Penny commanded, idling the car as the big clock began to strike. "I'm going to count the strokes." I'll do it too, just so you can't pull a fast one on me. That's 2 now." As each slow note sounded, Louise counted it aloud. Reaching 12, she paused, but the clock did not. There was a slight break, then another stroke. "Why, it did strike 13!" she gasped. "Or perhaps I became mixed up." "You made no mistake," Penny declared, easing the car to a standstill by the curb. "It struck 13, and that last stroke wasn't like the others." "It did seem to have a slightly different tone. I wonder why." "Someone may have struck the bell an extra tap," Penny answered with conviction. "Louise, don't you see? It must be a signal." End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. Through the Window. "You have the craziest ideas, Penny," Louise scoffed. "I'll admit the clock struck an extra time, but it must have been because something's wrong with the mechanism. A signal? My eye!" Lowering the car window, Penny peered curiously up at the tower, which was shrouded in fog and mist. "Lou, there's someone up there in the cupola. It may be Charley Phelps." "You can't make a mystery out of Charley," yawned Louise. "Probably he's trying to repair the clock. Come on, let's go home." Reluctantly, Penny raised the window glass. Before she could drive on, another car pulled up, not far from the tower. The driver, a man in an overcoat, swung open the door as if to alight. However, observing Penny's car parked close by, he seemed to change his mind. Keeping his head lowered so that his face was shadowed, he drove away. "Who was that man?" Penny demanded suspiciously. "I'm afraid I neglected to inquire," Louise retorted. "So careless of me." "Whoever he was, he intended to enter the tower. When he saw us here, he became nervous and drove away." "Oh, Penny, you're the limit." "Maybe I am, but I know what I think. The striking of the clock was a signal from some sort of meeting at the tower." "A board of directors confab, perhaps?" teased Louise. "Listen," said Penny, ignoring the jibes. "I want to park the car on a side street and then come back here afoot. Something is up and I mean to find out about it." "Oh, Penny," Louise sighed. "If I don't get home, Mother will never allow me to go anywhere with you again. Don't you realize what time it is?" 13 o'clock, Penny chuckled. "It may never be that again, so I must strike while the clock strikes, so to speak. How about it?" "Well, it is your car," Louise replied with a shrug. "I'm powerless in your hands." Penny drove around a block, parking on a well-lighted street. She and Louise then approached the tower afoot. Not wishing to be seen, they took care to keep close to a high hedge which edged the grounds. "I never felt more silly in my life," Louise complained. "What are we supposed to do now?" "Windows were made to look through," Penny responded coolly. "Let's see what Charley Phelps is doing inside the tower." Circling the building, the girls placed a rock beneath one of the rear windows. From that unstable perch, Penny was able to peer into the living quarters of the tower. "Well, what do you see, Sherlock?" Louise demanded impatiently. "Nothing." "How perfectly amazing!" Louise taunted mischievously.
What do you make of it?"
"Charley Phelps seems to be reading a newspaper." "Baffling. It must have some deep, dark significance." With a sigh, Penny stepped down from the rock. "Want to look?" she invited. "I do not." "Then I guess we may as well go home," Penny said reluctantly. As she spoke, both girls heard an automobile pull up in front of the tower. With reviving hope, Penny placed a restraining hand on Louise's arm, forcing her to wait in the shadow of the building. A minute elapsed and then the front door of the tower slammed shut. Without the slightest hesitation, Penny once more moved to her previous position beneath the window.
"Charley has some visitors," she reported in a whisper. "4 men I never saw before. I wish I could hear what they were saying."
"Why not smash the window or saw a hole in the wall?" Louise proposed sarcastically. Penny stepped from the rock, offering the place to her chum.
"Do look inside," she urged. "Maybe you'll recognize those men. It's really important."
Louise unwillingly did as requested, but after a moment moved away from the window. "I never saw any of them either," she said. "They must be friends of Charley Phelps." "It's a special meeting," Penny insisted. "I suspect other men may come along within a few minutes." "I know one thing," Louise announced flatly. "I'll not be here to see them. If you're not ready to go home, then I shall walk." "Oh, all right, I'll go," Penny grumbled. "It seems a pity though, just when we might have learned something important." Taking care to remove the stone from beneath the tower window, she hastened after her chum. In silence, they drove to the Sidell home where Louise alighted. "Sorry to have spoiled your fun, Penny," she apologized as she said goodnight. "If you'll only arrange to conduct your explorations by daylight, I'll try to cooperate." Arriving at her home a few minutes later, Penny found her father waiting up for her. Mr. Parker had attended a meeting of the Camp Fund board and, upon returning at 11:30, had been disturbed to find his daughter absent. Hold it," Penny greeted him before he could speak. "I know it's late, but I can explain everything." "You're always able to explain too well," the editor responded dryly. "Mrs. Weems expected that you would be home not later than 11 o'clock." "Well, one thing just seemed to lead to another, Dad. Louise and I saw a wonderful show. I obtained a copy of Ben Bowman's signature, and then to top it off, the Hubell clock struck 13 again." "Which in your estimation explains everything?" "I wish it did," Penny said, neatly changing the subject. "Dad, Louise and I saw a number of men going into the tower tonight. Obviously, they were summoned there by the striking of the clock." "Tommy rot."
"Oh, Dad, you haven't a scrap of imagination," Penny sighed. "Has it never occurred to you that Charley Phelps may be connected with the Hoods?"
"Never," replied Mr. Parker. "And if I were you, I shouldn't go around making such wild suggestions. You might find yourself involved in serious trouble."
"You're the only one to whom I've confided my theory, Dad. In fact, it only this minute occurred to me."
"So I thought, Penny. If I were you, I would forget the Hubell clock. Why not devote yourself to something worthwhile?"
"For instance?"
"I'll provide an interesting job. I've been asked to select play equipment for the new orphans camp. I'll be happy to turn the task over to you."
"Do you think I could do it?" Penny asked dubiously.
"Why not? You can learn from the matron of the home what's needed and then make your selections."
"I'll be glad to do it, Dad. When is the camp to open?"
"The actual date hasn't been set, but it will be soon. That is, unless a serious disagreement arises about the camp site."
"A disagreement?" Penny inquired curiously.
"Yes, Mr. Blake is trying to influence the board to buy a tract of land which he controls."
"At a very high price?"
"Well, the price seems to be fair enough. I personally don't care for the site, however. It's located on the river, but too close to the swamp."
"Then why does the board consider it?"
"Mr. Blake gave a very generous donation, you remember. I figured at the time he would expect something in return."
"He'll profit by the sale?"
"Obviously. I don't know who owns the land, but Blake will receive a commission on the sale. The board also is considering a wooded property closer to Riverview, and I favor that site."
"Will the board listen to you, Dad?"
"I rather doubt it. My objections weren't especially vigorous. Either property will be satisfactory, and Blake's price is a trifle more attractive." With a yawn, Mr. Parker arose and locked the front door. "It's after 1:00, he said. "Let's go to bed." Penny started up the stairway, only to pause as the telephone rang. While her father answered it, she waited, curious to learn who would be calling at such a late hour. In a moment he replaced the receiver on its hook. "That was the night editor of the Star," he explained briefly.
"Has a big story broken, Dad?"
"Another storage barn was burned to the ground about 10 minutes ago. The night editor called to ask how I wanted the story handled."
"Then the depredation was done by the Hoods!"
"It looks that way." Penny came slowly down the stairway to face her father.
"Dad, if the fire was only set a few minutes ago, doesn't that support my theory?"
"Which theory? You have so many."
"I mean about the Hubell Tower," Penny said soberly.
The clock struck 13 on the night the Preston barn was destroyed. Don't you see, Dad? The Hoods hold their meetings and then ride forth to accomplish their underhanded work." End of chapter 14. Chapter 15. Tracing Ben Bowman. "Penny, let's postpone this animated discussion until morning," Mr. Parker said wearily, reaching to switch out the bridge lamp. "Then you don't agree with me that the caretaker of the tower may have some connection with the Hoods, Dad?" she asked in an injured tone. "I certainly do not," he answered firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to bed." Decidedly crestfallen, Penny followed her father upstairs. For several minutes she stood by the window of her room, gazing toward the Hubell Tower whose lights could be seen dimly across the city. Then, with a shrug, she too dismissed the subject from her mind and gave herself to slumber. Mr. Parker had gone to the office by the time Penny arose the next morning. Finding a discarded newspaper by his plate, she eagerly scanned it for an account of the midnight fire. To her disappointment, only a brief item appeared on the front page. The story merely said that the barn of John Hancock, truck farmer, had been destroyed by a blaze of unknown origin. In the right-hand column was another news item to the effect that Sheriff Daniels had made no progress in tracing the missing Clem Davis. Tossing aside the paper, Penny helped with the breakfast dishes. As gently as possible, she broke the news to Mrs. Weems that she might have to make another trip to Claymore. "Why bother to remain home even for meals?" the housekeeper said severely. "I declare, I don't know what your father is thinking about to allow you such liberties. When I was a girl, it was considered very daring to go for a buggy ride without a chaperone," Penny completed mischievously. "Now, I'm very sorry about last night. Louise and I didn't intend to remain out so late." "It was after 1 o'clock when you came in," Mrs. Weems replied, her voice stern. "You know I don't approve of such hours for a girl of your age." "I promise it won't happen again. Please let me go to Claymore though. I'm expected to buy playground equipment for the Riverview Orphans' new camp." Exerting all her charm, Penny explained the necessity of the trip. Finally convincing Mrs. Weems that the excuse had not been thought up on the spur of the moment, she was granted the requested permission. Penny's next move was to induce Louise Sidell to accompany her on the excursion. Both girls laid siege to Mrs. Sidell, who somewhat dubiously said that her daughter might go, providing she would be home by nightfall. Recalling her father's instructions, Penny called at the Riverview Orphans' Home to talk with the matron. There she obtained a list of playground equipment to be purchased, with suggested prices for each item. As the girls were leaving the institution, they met Miss Anderson and paused to inquire about Adele. "The child seems to be nervous and unhappy," the young woman told them. "Especially so since she ran away. We sincerely hope she will presently become adjusted." Penny asked if there was any prospect the little girl could be adopted. "Not very soon," Miss Anderson replied regretfully. "In fact, her name is not on the list of eligibles. We never allow a child to leave the home until we feel that he or she is capable of adapting himself to new conditions." The drive to Claymore was an enjoyable one, and by 11 o'clock the girls had purchased many of the items on their list. To the amusement of the department store salesman, they insisted upon testing teeter-totters, swings, and even the slides. "All this equipment is for the Riverview Orphans' Home, not for ourselves," Penny explained. "The committee will pay for it." "Very well, we'll send the merchandise just as soon as a check is received," the salesman promised, giving her an itemized bill. Feeling very well satisfied with their purchases, Penny and Louise wandered into another department of the store. The delightful aroma of food drew them to a lunch counter, and from there they went to the main floor. The store was very crowded. As Penny was inspecting a pair of gloves on a counter, a man pushed past her and ran toward the nearest exit. In surprise, she turned around, unintentionally blocking the way of a store detective. Shoving past her, he pursued the first man, only to lose him in the milling crowd near the door. "That fellow must have been a shoplifter," Penny remarked to Louise. "I think he got away too." The unexpected commotion had drawn the interest of many shoppers. Mingling with the crowd, the girls heard a woman tell a companion that the man who had escaped was wanted for attempting to pass a forged check. A moment later, the store detective came striding down the aisle. Pausing at the jewelry counter, he spoke to the floor man, confirming the report. "Well, the fellow escaped. He tried to pass a bum check for $50. "What name did he use?" the floor man inquired. "Ben Bowman. It will be something else next time." Penny had heard the words. Startled by the name, she moved hastily to the detective's side. "Excuse me," she addressed him. "Did I understand you to say that a man by the name of Ben Bowman forged a check?" "That's correct, miss," the detective answered, staring at her curiously. "Know anything about the man?" "I think I may. Would it be possible for me to see the check?" The detective removed it from a vest pocket, offering the signature for inspection. One glance satisfied Penny that the check had been signed by the same man who had been sending her father crank messages. "At home I have a telegram which I'm sure bears this identical signature," she revealed. "I've never seen the man though, except as he ran through the store." The store detective questioned Penny at length about her knowledge of Bowman. Realizing that a description of the man might be of great value to her, he showed her a small card which bore a mounted photograph. "This is Ben Bowman," he assured her. "He's an expert forger and uses any number of names. Think you can remember the face?" "I'll try to," Penny replied. "He doesn't seem to have any distinguishing features though." "His angular jaw is rather noticeable," the detective pointed out. "Brown eyes are set fairly close together. He's about 6'2" and dresses well." Penny was highly elated to have a description of Bowman and especially pleased that the man had been traced to Claymore. The fact that he was a known forger encouraged her to hope that the police would soon apprehend him. "That $100 Dad offered for Bowman's capture is as good as mine already," she boasted gleefully to Louise as they left the store. "All I need to do is wait." "No doubt you'll collect," Louise admitted grudgingly. "I never met anyone with your brand of luck." "I feel especially lucky today, too," Penny said with a gay laugh. "Tell you what, let's make another tour of the vegetable markets." "It will make us late in getting home. The time is sure to be wasted, too." "Oh, come on," Penny urged, seizing her by the arm. "I promise to have you in Riverview no later than 3 o'clock." In driving into Claymore that morning, the girls had noticed a large outdoor market near the outskirts of the city. Returning to it, Penny parked the car and with her chum wandered around the sales area. "Nice fat chicken?" a farm woman asked persuasively, holding up an uninviting specimen. "Fresh eggs?" "We're looking for melons," Penny replied. "Mr. Breldway has some nice cantaloupes," the woman returned. "He got a truckload of them in Riverview just the other day." Locating Mr. Breldway's place of business, Louise and Penny began to inspect the melons offered for sale. Almost at once, they came upon a basket of cantaloupes which bore a blurred stamp. "Louise, these look like the Davis crop!" Penny cried excitedly. "Wouldn't you say someone had deliberately blocked out the old marking?" "It does appear that way." "Maybe we can find just one melon with the original stamp." Penny dug into the basket with both hands, tossing up cantaloupes for Louise to place on the ground. Their activities immediately drew the attention and displeasure of Mr. Breldway. "If you're looking for a good melon, let me help you," he said, hurrying towards them. Penny straightened, holding up a cantaloupe for him to see. "I don't need any help," she said distinctly. "I found the melon I want. It bears the Davis stamp." End of chapter 15. Chapter 16. A familiar name. "The melon you have selected is a very good one," the market man declared, not understanding the significance of Penny's remark. "Shall I put it in a sack for you?" "I'm not interested in the melon, only in the stamp," Penny replied. "Do you realize that you may be liable for arrest?" "What do you mean, liable to arrest?" the man demanded. "I'm an honest dealer. I have a license." "Look at these melons." Penny held one up which bore the blurred stamp. "The trade name has been altered." The dealer took the cantaloupe from her, examining it briefly. She then offered him the single melon bearing the Davis stamp. "Well, what about it?" he asked. "Just this. A few nights ago, a truckload of melons similar to these was stolen from the Davis farm near Riverview. The thief was trailed right to this city." "You're trying to say that I sell stolen melons?" "I'm not making any direct accusations," Penny replied evenly. "No doubt you can explain where you got the melons." "Certainly I can. I bought a truckload of them from a farmer named John Toby. The melons were good, priced cheap, and I didn't pay any attention to the stamp." "Is Mr. Toby a regular dealer?" "I buy from him now and then, when his prices are right. I never bothered to ask any questions." "Where does that man live?" "I can't tell you that. He's a large, heavy-set fellow with brown hair and eyes." The description was too meager to be of value to Penny. "Does Mr. Toby drive a red truck?" she inquired thoughtfully. "He did this last time." "It was a red truck which was stolen from the Davis farm," Penny said quietly. "I'm sure these melons came from there too." "I paid good money for them," the dealer retorted in a defiant tone. "So far as I knew, they belonged to this fellow Toby. I can't investigate every farmer who offers me produce." "All the same, you could get into serious trouble for selling stolen melons," Penny replied. "Of course, I have no intention of going to the police, providing you are willing to cooperate." "What do you mean, cooperate?" the dealer asked suspiciously. "Only this. Will you see John Toby again?" "That's hard to tell. He said he might bring in another load of melons within the next few days." "When you receive the next shipment, will you notify me?" "Yes, I'm willing to do that," the dealer promised. "If Toby's crooked, I want to know it myself." Penny gave the man her name, address, and telephone number. Knowing that he might not be able to reach her quickly enough, she instructed him to detain the farmer by force if necessary. "If I can't get in touch with you, I may have the fellow questioned by the police," the dealer offered. "I don't want to put myself into a hole." Penny was not entirely satisfied that the market man would keep his promise. However, she hesitated to make a report to the police without first consulting her father. Everything considered, it seemed best to let the situation work out as it would. "Well, your luck is still running true to form," Louise said jokingly as the girls drove toward Riverview. "Do you have any idea who John Toby may be?" "Not the slightest," Penny confessed. "The description would fit Hank Holloway, or for that matter, any one of a dozen men I know." The girls arrived in Riverview by mid-afternoon after an uneventful trip. Penny dropped Louise at the Sidell home and then went to the Star office to talk with her father. Mr. Parker was absent from his desk, but his secretary, who was typing letters, explained that he would return in a moment. Penny sat down in her father's chair to wait. A bulky, unsealed envelope lay on the desk. Peering at it curiously, she noted that it bore the marking: property deed, lots 456, 457, and 458. "What's this?" she asked aloud. "Is Dad buying property?" "Oh, no," the secretary replied, glancing up from her typewriter. "That's the deed and the abstract for the orphans' campsite." "I wonder which property it is." "The land Mr. Blake controls, I believe. At least he brought the papers into the office this morning for your father's inspection. I heard him say that if the forms are satisfactory, the deal will be completed at once." Penny unfolded one of the lengthy documents, shaking her head as she scanned the legal terms. "I don't see how Dad makes anything of this," she said. "Such a mess of words and names." "I imagine Mr. Parker intends to turn it over to his lawyer," the secretary smiled. The editor entered the office at that moment, and Penny directed her next question to him. "Dad, is it all settled that the camp board will purchase Mr. Blake's land?" "Practically so," he answered. "If my lawyer, Mr. Adams, approves the abstract, the deal will be completed. Against my advice, Mrs. Van Cleve has already given Blake $500 to hold an option." "Why did she do that, Dad?" Well, Blake convinced her that he had another buyer for the property. It's the old story. Competition stimulates interest. Do the papers seem to be all right? Oh, I've not looked at them, Mr. Parker replied. Blake is a really good real estate man though, so there's not likely to be any flaw. Who actually owns the property, Dad? It's there on the abstract, he answered. Why not look it up for yourself? Too much like doing homework, Penny grinned, but she spread the document on the desk and began to read various names aloud. Anna and Harry Clark to Lydia Goldwine to Benjamin Bowman. What was that name? Mr. Parker demanded sharply. Benjamin Bowman. Penny peered at the document a second time to make certain she had made no mistake. That's the truth, Dad. Who knows? Maybe it's your old pal, Ben. Are you making up that name? Mr. Parker asked skeptically. Penny thrust the abstract into his hand. Here, read it for yourself, Dad. Bowman seems to be the present owner of the land. Mr. Parker rapidly scanned the document. The land is held by a Benjamin Bowman, he admitted, frowning. A strange coincidence? I never heard of a Bowman family living near Riverview, Penny remarked, reaching for a telephone book. Did you? No, but Bowman is a fairly common name. Turning to the B section, Penny went through the telephone list. There's only one Bowman here, she said, penciling a circle around the name. A Mrs. Maud Bowman. The name Maud Bowman doesn't appear on the abstract, Mr. Parker declared as he studied the document once more. There's something funny about this. Mr. Blake seemed rather eager to dispose of the land, didn't he? His price was a bit low, which surprised me, Mr. Parker said, thinking aloud. Probably everything can be explained satisfactorily. Then why not ask Mr. Blake to do it? Penny proposed. He should be able to tell you something about his client. That's a real first-class idea, Mr. Parker agreed, and he reached for a telephone. I'll ask Mr. Blake to come here at once. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17. False Records. Mr. Blake, suave, completely at ease, sat opposite Mr. Parker and Penny in the editor's private office. I came as soon as I could after receiving your telephone message, Mr. Parker, he said pleasantly. Now, what seems to be the trouble? Perhaps I shouldn't have bothered you, the editor apologized. However, in glancing over the abstract for the Orphans' Camp property, I noticed that the land is owned by a man named Benjamin Bowman. Quite true. I'm acting as his agent. It happens that I have had dealings with a man by that name, resumed Mr. Parker. Rather unpleasant dealings, I might add. I'm curious to learn if this property owner is the same fellow. Very unlikely, I should think, Mr. Blake shrugged. My client does not reside in Riverview. Nor does the man I have in mind. Can you tell us what he looks like? Penny interposed eagerly. I am very sorry, but I can't, Mr. Blake returned. I've never met Mr. Bowman. Yet you act as his agent? Mr. Parker inquired in astonishment. All our dealings have been by mail or telephone. I see, the editor commented reflectively. Well, at least you can provide me with the man's address. I can't do that either, Mr. Blake declined. Benjamin Bowman is a salesman with no permanent address. He communicates with me at fairly regular intervals, but until I hear from him, I have no idea where he will be the following week. Your description seems to fit the man of my acquaintance, Mr. Parker said dryly. But tell me, how do you expect to complete this deal? Will Bowman come here to sign the necessary papers? Oh, that won't be required. He's already made out the sales documents and also given me a power of attorney. Mr. Bowman seems to think of everything, Mr. Parker remarked grimly. I was hoping for the pleasure of meeting him. I really don't see what all this has to do with the sale of the property, Mr. Blake reproved in a mild voice. You feel the site is a suitable one and the price right? I have no serious objections to it. Then why allow your personal feelings to interfere with the deal? I have no intention of doing so, Mr. Parker answered. Then, if you'll give your approval, we'll sign the final papers tomorrow at my office. The dedication of the new camp has been set for the 10th of the month, and that means no time can be lost. Everything seems to have been settled without my approval, Mr. Parker said, smiling. However, if you don't mind, I'll keep this abstract a little longer. As you like, the real estate man shrugged. Have your lawyer go over the records with a fine-tooth comb. He'll find no flaws anywhere. Arising, Mr. Blake bowed politely and left the office. Penny waited until she knew that he was a considerable distance from the door before seeking her father's opinion of the interview. Everything may be on the level, he conceded, frowning. I've no reason to distrust Blake, and yet I can't help feeling that there's something peculiar about this land deal. Blake has been rushing things through at such a furious rate, Penny nodded. Another thing, Ben Bowman is a well-known forger. What makes you think that? The editor asked alertly. Any real information? Penny revealed everything she had learned that day at Claymore. Mr. Parker listened attentively, making few comments until she had finished. I'm more than ever convinced there's something phony about Bowman's connection with this affair, he declared grimly. We'll see what my lawyer has to say. Having made up his mind that the transaction merited a thorough investigation, Mr. Parker personally carried the questionable abstract to a reliable law firm, Adams and McPherson. The report came back late in the afternoon and was relayed to Penny at the dinner table. Mr. Adams says the abstract seems to be drawn up correctly, the editor disclosed. He could find no flaw in it or any of the records at the courthouse. Then apparently we jumped too hasty to conclusions, Penny remarked in disappointment. I'm not so sure. Mr. Adams tells me that the ownership of the property is a very muddled affair. Muddled? Yes, it has changed hands many times in the past year, and oddly, none of the buyers or sellers seem to be known in Riverview. What does Mr. Adams think about that, Dad? He advises that the records be inspected very carefully. It will take weeks, though, for they are quite involved. I suppose that will hold up the opening of the camp. It may, Mr. Parker acknowledged. However, it seems wise to take every precaution even if the camp isn't opened this year. Too much money is involved to risk paying for land which may have a faulty title. The following day, the editor conferred with members of the Camp Fund Board, telling of his findings. To his chagrin, Mrs. Van Cleve did not share his views. I trust Mr. Blake's judgment implicitly, she insisted. I'm sure the property will be satisfactory in every way. If there should by any chance be a flaw in the title, he would make good. We can't possibly delay the dedication another week, added another feminine member of the board. The summer's nearly over now. At least postpone making the final payment until after I've had another report from my lawyers, Mr. Parker pleaded. Very well, we'll do that, Mrs. Van Cleve agreed. Mr. Blake is so obliging. I'm sure he will allow us to set up equipment on the land, even though we don't actually possess title. The entire transaction seemed very unbusinesslike to Mr. Parker, but he did not attempt to force his opinion upon the board members. Accordingly, plans went forward for the grand opening of the camp. Stories appeared regularly in the Star, playground equipment and floored tents were set up on the campsite, and the actual dedication program was announced. You might know Mr. Blake would be invited to make the main speech, Penny remarked disapprovingly as she scanned the latest story of the coming affair. Every day, in every way, he gives me a bigger and bigger pain. Throughout the week, both she and Louise had been very active, helping out at the new campsite. The land had been cleared of underbrush, trails had been constructed, and a well dug. While supervising the setting up of slides, merry-go-rounds, and teeter-totters, Penny upon several occasions had disagreements with Mr. Blake. The man remained at the site almost constantly, imposing his wishes upon everyone. "A great deal of time and money has been spent getting that place ready for the dedication," Penny commented to her father. "If anything should happen that the final papers aren't signed, it would be a pity." "I've had no report as yet," Mr. Parker answered. "My lawyers tell me they've never delved into a more involved case." "What does Mr. Blake think about the investigation?" "He seems to be agreeable. However, I suspect he's been working on the various board members, trying to get them to conclude the deal without waiting." "How long will it be before you have a final report, Dad?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I expected to get it long before this." In the flurry of preparing for the camp dedication, Penny had no opportunity to give much thought to other affairs. She did not see Seth McGuire. The sheriff had nothing to disclose concerning Clem Davis' disappearance, and the Black Hood seemed to have become an extinct organization. On the morning of the designated date, Penny was abroad early. She and Louise planned to drive to the dedication exercises together and wished to arrive before the grounds were congested. Eating breakfast hurriedly, Penny scarcely noticed when her father was called to the telephone. He absented himself from the dining room nearly 15 minutes. As he returned to the table, Penny pushed back her chair, ready to leave. "Well, I'll see you at the campgrounds, Dad," she said lightly. "I don't know what to do about the dedication," responded Mr. Parker in a sober tone. "By rights, there should be none." Penny stared at him. "I've just heard from my lawyers," Mr. Parker explained. "Then there is a flaw in the title, as you suspected." "Decidedly. It's a very mixed up mess, and as yet we're not sure what it may mean." "Tell me about it, Dad," Penny pleaded, sliding back into her chair. "Benjamin Bowman, whoever he may be, doesn't own the camp property." "Then in whose name is it?" "The property doesn't belong to anyone." "Why, how ridiculous!" Penny exclaimed. "Doesn't every piece of land in the world belong to someone?" "Actually, the heirs of Rosanna and Joseph Schulte own this particular property, but there are no heirs." "What you say doesn't make sense to me, Dad." "The whole affair is very involved," Mr. Parker explained. "In tracing back the history of the land, my lawyers found that originally it was owned by Rosanna and Joseph Schulte, an elderly couple who had no known relatives. They sailed for Germany more than 50 years ago. The ship sank, and presumably they were lost. Their land was never claimed, and somehow the state overlooked the case." "But I thought the property had changed hands many times in recent years." "Only theoretically. All those records have been falsified." "By whom, Dad? Ben Bowman?" "My lawyers are inclined to think Blake may be at the bottom of it. He is a very shrewd real estate man, and in examining records at the courthouse, he may have learned about this floating property." "Then he deliberately tried to cheat the Camp Fund Board." "It looks that way. Neither Ben Bowman nor anyone else owns the property. Had you not noticed his name on the abstract, it's unlikely the fraud would have been uncovered for quite a few years to come." "What will you do, Dad?" Penny inquired, deeply distressed. "The dedication is scheduled to start within an hour." "I don't see how it can be postponed," Mr. Parker said soberly. "It will have to go on according to schedule." "Afterwards, you'll ask for Blake's arrest?" "There's no real evidence against him." "No evidence!" "He claims to be a mere agent of Ben Bowman. All of the deeds and legal papers were drawn up by some other person. If any accusation is made against him, he can escape by maintaining that he knew nothing of the back records." "There's one person who might be able to implicate him," Penny exclaimed. "Ben Bowman!" "Bowman should have it in his power to clear up some of the mystery," Mr. Parker agreed. "But how are we to find him?" "I don't know," Penny admitted. "It looks rather hopeless unless the police just present him to us wrapped in pink ribbon." The clock struck 9. Daring not to linger any longer, Penny hastily bade her father goodbye and left the house. Driving to the campsite with Louise Sidell, she told her chum of the latest complications. Mr. Blake is one of the worst hypocrites in the world, she declared feelingly. He pretends he wants to help the orphans, and all the while he intends to trick the board and make a nice profit for himself. Your father won't let him get away with it, Louise returned confidently. So long as the money hasn't been paid over, there's no need to worry. Arriving at the campsite, the girls went at once to the official tent. To their surprise, Mr. Blake, Mrs. Van Cleve, and all members of the board, save Mr. Parker, were there. On the table lay various legal papers which bore signatures still moist with ink. Penny gazed from one person to another, slowly comprehending the scene. "You're not buying this property!" she exclaimed in protest. Mrs. Van Cleve's reply stunned her. "It seemed unreasonable to keep Mr. Blake waiting," the woman said quietly. "The transaction has just been completed." End of chapter 17.